It anyway. Please give a special Arcade Festival welcome to our guests, Sonia Faleiro, Isa Sanusi, Dipo Faloyin, and our host, Ayisha Osori.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. It's good to be here with all of you. That was a very tough session to follow, so I hope that we'll be able to keep your attention here. It's not fiction, but I think it's going to be equally interesting. So, just a little intro. My name is Ayisha Osori. I work with Open Society Foundations, and I've also written a few books, including one that's called Love Doesn't Win Elections. Now, I think the subject of this panel is actually very, very timely, considering that we live in a time of AI and lots of disinformation. We also live in a much more polarized world where algorithms keep feeding us the same things over and over again, making it really hard to see other people's truth. So I think this is a really interesting topic right now. And before I introduce the guests, their main profiles are in here, so I'm not going to take too much time. But I just want to say that, just picking from the last panel, one example of a truth, and I'm going to ask each of you, that will be the opening question, but one truth that I guess has been contested has been whether white male writers are being marginalized. So over the last couple of years, there's been articles in the mainstream media from 2002 all the way to currently, where the new Booker Prize winner is male, and there's been some sort of happiness that, a man has won. But the truth is, when you look at who's winning the prizes, if you just even look at the Booker Prize for the last 10 years, you'll find that out of 10 winners, 5 have been white men. But this sense of the truth was out there, that white men were being marginalized, white male writers were being marginalized because of DEI. So more people who are queer, or more people who are black, or more women were winning the prizes. But when you do the data, that's not what it tells you. So that's an example of when people have an agenda and the truth becomes contested. But very often, as Dipo sort of pointed out in his book, Africa is not a country, that sometimes these stories and narratives, they barely can withhold any examination, because once you scratch them a little bit, you find out that there's something wrong with that truth. But let me just do a brief intro, because we have 3 amazing people here to discuss this topic. And I'm just going to start in alphabetical order. So it would be Dipo, who is the author of Africa is Not a Country, and he does writing on culture, history, identity, and colonialism. And then we also have Isa Sanusi, who's the executive director for Amnesty International Nigeria, which he joined Amnesty in 2016 as a media and communications manager, and he has a long history of work with the BBC. So maybe you tell us about the BBC and what it did to Trump's video and why it's in the crosshairs. Maybe that happened during your time, so you can tell us about that truth. And then finally, we have Sonia Faleiro, amazing writer and the author of several books. She writes nonfiction, so I think all of us here are generally nonfiction people. She's written a few books, including the most recent, The Robe and the Sword, How Buddhist Extremism is Shaping Modern Asia. So welcome. Please give them a round of applause. So I'll start with you, Sonia. But I'm just gonna, because first of all, you're our guest. You're the non-Nigerian who's sitting here, but you're an honorary Nigerian. But it's the same question I'm asking all of you. With all that's going on in the world right now, is there a particular narrative where there's several truths that you are sort of either thinking about, pondering about, learning from? I can give an example, which hopefully Dipo and Isa were not planning to use that example, but just the sense, we're right now in Nigeria contesting whether there's a genocide against Christians. So I'm sure that's one truth for many people, that there is a genocide happening against Christians. And then for many others, including obviously the government, that's not the truth. So they see another truth. So for me, that's an example. But please feel free to choose any other examples that you want to. But I'll start with you, Sonia.
Thank you so much, Ayisha. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. It's so exciting to be back in Lagos. This is such a fascinating and profound question because we are living it right now. But I think I, as a journalist, and potentially most journalists would argue that actually certain things are not up for contestation. And those things are facts. Facts are not something that you can argue about. And I think one of those facts that is divided the world in a way that makes no sense is the fact that there is a genocide in Gaza, right? There is a genocide in Gaza. The Palestinians are being wiped out. The figures that have been given publicly do not account for the bodies that are under the rubble. And as recently as 2 weeks ago, the United Nations said that those figures could climb into the hundreds of thousands. And even if one were to put aside these figures, and why would you, there is the fact that a way of life is being completely eliminated. A society is being eliminated. Education, environment, schools, everything that makes us human is being eliminated in Palestine. It is a genocide. But the fact that so many of us are having a conversation about whether it is a genocide or whether it is a war, what role Hamas has to play, and how this is all about October 7, shows you that we are in an incredibly precarious place where the truth is up for debate, where facts no longer matter, where we are being led by opinion. And that is very frightening, because if you cannot believe facts, then what can you believe? Then everything from the ground that we walk on is extremely shaky. So for me, I would say this is the one really world-changing event that has shocked me, because it's showed me that perhaps we don't have the education, we don't have the emotional ability, we don't have the human decency to see the humanity in other people. And then to say that, well, actually, this is about facts, it's not, because facts are not up for debate. So that would be the big one for me, I would say.
Oh, thank you very much, Sonia, for bringing that. I mean, I mentioned that Sonia has written lots of books, including one she edited called Gaza, A Story of a Genocide. So obviously she knows what's going on in Gaza really personally. But I mean, I would like to hear what Dipo and Isa have to say about that. But I hear you, not debating it, but there are people who still contest that there's a genocide happening in Gaza. So as you said, these days it doesn't seem like it's enough to have facts. I don't know what it is. I don't know whether it's about education alone. It could be a mix of different things. There's a sense that we're less communal. We're more engaged with our phones and social media. There's algorithms. And as economic pressures sort of trickle down and descend on all of us, we're all more fearful, more worried, thinking more individualistically, as capitalism has sort of programmed us to be. So I'm just saying there are many reasons, including just malevolence. I mean, there are people who just don't want to believe that what's happening in Gaza is happening there. But then some of them are backed by their religious beliefs and think that this is some sort of religious war. So I'm just saying, I actually am in one of those people now who everything I see, I'm sort of saying, I don't know what to think. But yes, I agree. The sun rises somewhere for now and still sets somewhere else. But Dipo, can you tell us your own? And if you want to comment on what Sonia said, please, it's a conversation. Feel free to jump in.
Hello? Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be back at Ake Festival. Such an honor to be on this panel as well. And I'll pick up on something that you just said. It certainly feels like we're not having a battle with facts, but right now the battleground seems to be around the algorithm. And the algorithm of social media, and the fight over what narrative can be presented and who gets to present that narrative. And so we see that in the US right now, there's behind the scenes, they're trying to organize a sale of TikTok. And right now, those who are, on the verge of buying TikTok, at least for the US audience, are friends of the current administration. And so it really does show that, there is a sort of a general realization that the next battleground for how we consume information is who has control of the algorithm. That is something that we should all be incredibly concerned about. And, we see it all the time. The sort of example that I would give, I'm tempted to sort of, when it comes to fighting facts right now, is to bring up sort of the use of people like Kemi Badenoch, for example, and the way in which, she's being used to push a certain narrative about Nigeria.
I'm guessing everybody knows who Kemi Badenoch is. Kemi Badenoch, yeah, okay.
Some are on the
you're going to
some
get
are on the
lynched.
front lines. Some here on the front lines are fighting the good fight, and how she's being used to push another series of facts about good migrants and bad migrants, and the value of asylum seekers and the history of asylum seekers and where they come from, and how they got to Britain or why they choose to go to France and all these things. So that is a battleground that is being used to push a certain agenda in order to completely shift the current global order. And so that is one that I think, as you mentioned, there are a series of basic facts around where migrants come from, where asylum seekers come from, why in which they choose to go to certain places, and more important than anything, the value that they have for decades had in building nations, building communities, improving where they are. And now that is being, people are attempting to shift that as if they are fundamentally a nuisance, or they're there to take rather than give, as they have done so for decades and decades. So that is a huge battleground that I think certainly involves all of us.
Definitely. And just picking on that again, back to you and saying that many of these narratives, they don't really hold up to any even cursory examination, because one of the things that the Reform Party in the UK has been harping on is that, immigrants are a threat to women and children, and they need to protect women and children. Meanwhile, the data, just regular data from the UK Gov shows that, like, by 11 times, it is white men who are domestic abusers, who are rapists. It's not the immigrants, just the data. So, how can they just say these things that have absolutely no truth? They're not even factual, but they say them and they get repeated and people pick them on. So, again, whose truth is it anyway? But to you, Isa.
Thank you very much. I just want to focus on our reality in Nigeria. And I had to start from the global scene. We now live in a time when it is very difficult to determine whether something is true or not. And people with power, resources, and money can determine what you see, can determine what you know, and can determine what you hear. So we are almost completely helpless in this world today, whereby algorithm will throw in your face what those behind it like you to see, whether those things are true or not. And there is a constant battle for your attention. And therefore, we are increasingly losing the capacity for critical thinking. even a simple data. For example, this morning I was looking at Twitter and I saw somebody saying that the reason why having a surge in insecurity now is because somebody from the south is the president and northerners are behind it, especially the school thing. But as a researcher of human rights, I know that from 2014 to date, we had at least 15 mass school abductions. And out of those 15, 10 of them happened when Buhari was president. 10 of them. And out of those 10, 8 of them happened in 2021 alone. So when you look at these things, you realize that those promoting those misleading, divisive information believe and know, and they are very confident that the people they are targeting have no capacity for critical thinking. They have no ability to go and check, are these things true? So their aim is to divide people, is to polarize, and increasingly make it very difficult for the truth to prevail. So that is why it's very important, and I believe that every one of us, like, since this genocide thing happened, I can't recall the number of times I have to respond to hundreds and hundreds of inquiries from international organizations, prominent personalities from across the world, media organizations. Was there a genocide? Were 18,000 churches burned down in Nigeria? Were 50,000 Christians killed? So the amplification of this data, the amplification of this misinformation, and trying to simplify the situation in Nigeria is not something straightforward. It's not something that you say, well, this is between Christians and Muslims. It's not. There are so many elements in it. When you look at what is happening in the Southeast, when you look at what is happening in Zamfara, Sokoto, Katsina, they are all different issues. And when you just read headlines and believe them without investigating, without bothering to go to, I went to the deepest parts of Zamfara state, and I saw the kind of pain people live through. And some of the things I cannot even say them because I might go into tears, because those things, no one even see them. So many, many things are happening, and powerful people, powerful institutions, rich people are constantly trying to control what we see, what we do, how we think, and what we believe. And that is why it's very important. Institutions and individuals have to not be silent. We have to speak. If you know that you have the authority to tell the truth, please use it very well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I don't know, Sonia or Dipo, do you want to say anything on what Isa has shared about? I mean, we've talked about genocide in Gaza, which the fact, and genocide here, which is great. I mean, I just want to throw in before you answer that Trump was the one who sort of put the spotlight on what's happening here with Christians, but I don't think he actually used the word genocide. I think that was used by who's following keenly, whether it was Ted Cruz or somebody else. It wasn't. Bill Maher, yes, the comedian. So Trump never used that word, but Bill Maher used it. But Trump has used genocide in a very relaxed, casual way when he talked about the white farmer genocide in South Africa, which wasn't. So just back to you.
I think that both Dipo and Isa made really important points that I want to very quickly respond to. Dipo's so correct when he talks about the algorithm. And the reason we need to think about the algorithm, the reason we need to think about what we are watching on Facebook, the reels that we are addicted to on Instagram, what we are tweeting or retweeting, is because what we are seeing is not organic. Somebody has fixed it so that we are getting certain kinds of information, and that somebody is not sitting in the clouds. These are the tech companies that control the flow of information, And these tech companies, and this is incredibly obvious right now, are very closely working hand in hand with Trump. So if you understand what Trump's agenda is, whether it is personal or whether it is political, you will start to understand what the agenda of the big tech companies are, and therefore what kind of information we are getting. So all of us need to be careful about how we respond and where we get that information from. But there's also the fact, I mean, this is one of the older stories, which is that whoever controls the news controls society. And in the UK, you've seen this for a very, very long time. The media organizations that have the most number of eyeballs are newspapers such as the Daily Mail, or, it's LBC Radio, for example. And these are organizations that not just lean towards the right, that are not just conservative, but have a very specific anti-immigrant agenda. They are anti-immigrant, they are anti-women, they are very inward-looking, they are Brexiteers, and now they are supporters of Nigel Farage. So it's a question of where do you get your information, who controls the information, and I think that classic question that we all have to ask ourselves, whether we are talking about the so-called Christian genocide here in Nigeria or the very obvious factual genocide in Gaza, who benefits from misinformation? Who benefits from starting stories that are clearly incorrect? And I think that's the kind of question that we need to focus our attention on.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think that for me is the beauty of in-person conversations that unfortunately, I think since the pandemic, we've all sort of gotten used to having more conversations online. It's convenient, it's cheaper, but just a shout out to Ake and Lola for doing this wonderful job of always bringing us together every year. But in-person conversations, I think will become, honestly, priceless, as MasterCard said, priceless. So please, round of applause. That was a cue for round of applause for Lola and Ake and her team. But let me move to you, Dipo. I'm curious because when you wrote Africa as a country, it was to challenge stereotypes about Africa, to sort of expand on what our real stories are and sort of counteract the stereotypical types of stories that come out of Africa. But in this context, now that we have, in a way, social media, which has democratized content production, everybody's producing what they want, do you think, let's use Africa since you wrote about Africa, that Africans are using that power wisely to sort of provide a counter narrative? That's one. And then the B part of the question is, what are the risks of that? Now that we've democratized content making and everybody's a content producer, apparently there's this data that says that we're all actually producing more than we're reading or watching. That doesn't apply to me for sure, but apparently, apparently now most people are producing than reading or even absorbing.
I mean, that doesn't surprise me. There is a tendency to sort of rush into... Social media gives you the ability to be an expert immediately and to project that so-called expertise to the world immediately. And so it's so tempting and so addicting to throw yourself into these conversations as quickly as possible. And historically, it has rewarded speed. So the first person to make a grand statement can lead the conversation. In terms of sort of your first question about are we part of those discussions, across Africa, historically, we've always been storytellers. We've always been passionate about telling our own stories. It's historical, it's factual. It's been done in so many different ways. We have traditions of oral storytelling. Part of the importance of our artifacts that have been stolen and kept in museums is that they were storytelling devices in many cases, including the Benin bronzes. So we've always been passionate storytellers, and I don't see that changing. But more than ever, it's really important that we take on this important responsibility that, look, whether we like it or not, someone is going to tell our stories. And they do it so passionately, so loudly, and so wrongly. And we need to realize that, this conversation maybe has started, we should all feel bad about the situation. It is a little bit gloomy, but also it should hopefully fire us all up to be part of the fight back. And part of the fight back is through the creative industries, through storytelling, through writing, and whatever talents you might have. And since the book came out, I haven't felt, with people who I've spoken to, I haven't felt that, they've given up that fight, that they can't be bothered to counteract those narratives. If anything, they're saying, yes, we want the rest of the world to stop with these fictional tales of Africa, where we are reduced to poverty and safari and nothing else. We want people to be out there, and we want the ability to tell our own specific stories, not just stories of being Nigerian, but stories of being, a Lagosian, or being from Zamfara, or as specific as possible from being from South. In Nigeria, sometimes what we get used to, there's only Yorubas, Hausas, Igbos in this whole place. There's so many wonderful, incredible stories that people are passionate about telling just in Nigeria alone, let alone across 54 countries, 1.4 billion people, and over 2,000 languages that make up Africa. So I certainly feel that energy and passion across the region, but it's something that we can never take for granted. We must continue to demand that we all have a role in telling our own stories and fighting back against the misinformation that has been going on since the colonialists arrived.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll move to Isa. I'm curious, just because of your line of work, and you've worked in the media as well, and this is a bit, well, I don't want to say controversial, but anyway, recently we had the honor list. So they were going to, the pardon list. So people were going to be pardoned for different crimes. And you were quoted as, obviously the Ogoni 9 were pardoned. And you wrote a piece, or you were quoted anyway in the papers as saying that the pardon should go further to exonerate those 9. And I read it and I thought, without absolute no position on that, but 4 chiefs of Ogoni were brutally killed. And I just wondered what their families would feel about, what's their truth? In a way, ostensibly, they got justice. Maybe it was a miscarriage of justice for the Ogoni 9. But I couldn't help thinking there are 2 stories at least here. There's the family of the Ogoni 9 and there's the family of the Ogoni 4 who were brutally killed. So I was just curious, did you grapple with that? Are you grappling with that? It sounds like, if I take a judgment position, that you sided with the truth of the Ogoni 9, and I'm here to advocate for the Ogoni 4.
Yes, thank you, Ayisha. So let me start by saying that at that time, on the 10th of November, we were in Port Harcourt, where we met family members, at least of 7 out of the 9 Ogoni 9. We met 7 of them. And a day before that, I was watching television and I saw the families of the 4 chiefs that were killed. And without sounding like we are dismissing the reality of what happened, I believe that as advocates for justice and truth, we lay all of our emphasis and attention on where authority was used brutally and unlawfully. And that is why sometimes when our organization talk about some things soldiers are doing or police, and then there is something by Boko Haram or other insurgents, people say, why are you harsh on the authorities? The reason why is that the authorities' attitude towards facts, towards the truth, has more wider impact, wider reach than the action of some individuals. Definitely there was the truth about the 4 chiefs, but the reality is that every person should be worried about the fact that a military government decided to use the power it has, to use state resources to subject the 9 activists to an unfair trial and also to execute them without the benefit of an appeal completely a total show of impunity and misuse of power. So that is why we always talk about the 9, and we believe that exonerating them is very important. And that is why when we have the state anywhere misusing is powers, we should be more worried, because if an individual, for example, commits a crime, it is a crime. But when the state, for example, in December 2015, members of the Shia sect, at least I think about 1,000 of them were slaughtered in Zaria. And among them there were infants and babies. So if we allow those kind of things to continue, the likely scenario that we are going to have in the future is a situation whereby the state can do anything. And when the state commits murder in the name of restoring peace or restoring order, people are likely to do the same, because if policeman can kill you because of you couldn't give him a bribe of 100 naira, people will also take up arms. And that is why our society is so violent, so lawless, because whatever the authority does is what people look at. And that is why we have to continue to emphasize the use of power in a lawful way and without taking advantage of the resources of the state, power of the state to commit injustice.
Thank you. And I think, thank you for laying out the facts, because listening to you then, yes, I was reminded of how the trial went. And there's a really wonderful podcast for those who are interested by The Republic. It's like a limited series on Ken Saro-Wiwa and the Ogoni 9. It's really brilliantly done. If you're curious, you should listen. Do any of you want to say anything based on what Isa said before I ask you another question? You? Okay. So Sonia, you've written several books, and some of them are based on real life, like the story of the girl that was raped in India, the young girl. And I can't help thinking, how do you deal with this sense of, I don't want to say legitimacy, because I feel like anybody can write anything, but you are writing someone else's story. And I'm just curious about how the truth of that, do you feel any tensions? Has anybody questioned your legitimacy to write certain types of stories because you're an outsider, it's not yours? And I can use an example that might resonate with Nigerians. After the October 2020 NSARS protest here, which young people led, there was a Sorosoke book that was written, and the person was foreign, I think Trish Lorenzo. Anyway, it caused a lot of furore here in Nigeria. People were very upset about it, that why should she write the book? Why should she get the prize to write the book? What does she know? So I'm just curious about that. What would you say? What's your ethics as a nonfiction writer?
So I don't think there is, I don't have a pat answer to this. I think it's something that you think about constantly and you respond to depending upon the situation and the stories. So on the one hand, do I believe that every individual should tell their own story? Absolutely. If something happens in your community, you are a member of the community, who is better to be an observer, to be a thinker, than you, the individual who has been directly affected? I think, on the other hand, there is something to be said for having for being dispassionate about a subject, for viewing it through the lens of facts rather than feeling, to coming to it from the point of a journalist, with all the many years of work that I've put into building that career, with my understanding of the ethics that are involved. But it also means that when you decide to tell a story that is not yours, and if you are going to be a journalist or a nonfiction writer, you're never really going to tell a story that's not yours. So that the very fact of your job it requires you to tell other people's stories. But again, I mean, part of that decision to do that job and to understand that those ethics is to educate yourself, right? I mean, you have to know what you're talking about. And sometimes that means going really deep into a community. And that's why sometimes, not necessarily always, but sometimes books can do things that daily journalism, long form journalism even cannot do. So in the case of The Good Girls, which Ayisha is talking about, it's a book that I took 5 years to write and report. It's a book about 2 little girls in a village in India who were found hanging from a mango tree. And the stories that came out of that village, the stories that were presented by the media that created absolutely rightfully a furor across the country and across the world, was one thing. But it turned out that the facts were another. But in order to understand some facts, you do need to spend some time. And for me, that time commitment was 3 years of reporting and 5 years of writing altogether. So yes, everyone should tell their own stories. And yes, we also have the right to tell stories that are not particular to us or not personal to us. But if we are going to take on that challenge, we also need to accept the responsibility that comes with it.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And thank you. You've raised something that I think we can discuss a little bit before we turn over to the participants for questions, and that's the ethics of media. And I think we touched on it earlier, just the ethics of journalism and the ethics of media. And I think, Sonia, you mentioned the right-wing media. But even the mainstream, like these days we find that, or what we thought was mainstream. So I guess I used to think once upon a time BBC was mainstream, CNN was mainstream, while you had maybe Fox as one extreme and MSNBC as another extreme. But what's your sense of how are the media's also being controlled by algorithms? Because I guess these days I can barely watch any mainstream news because I feel like they all have an agenda. I don't believe what they're saying. You know, like we like to dump on Trump, but these days I hear myself saying lamestream media the way he does, because really their reporting is so biased. You can tell. So I'm curious, when we talk about whose truth is it anyway, what's your sense? We've talked about social media a lot and algorithms, but the mainstream media, what are they doing? What is influencing them? Are they in the pockets of the billionaires as well? And again, how do we, what's the antidote?
I can give you an example based on what's happening in India, which, as you know, is currently in the grip of a Hindu extremist authoritarian government. And the way that the Indian Prime Minister got the Indian media under control, and the Indian media, like the Indian publishing industry, is vast, exists in many, many, many languages, many formats, extremely vibrant and extremely exciting space, and which is why it had to be brought under control. And the way that the Indian Prime Minister did that was to start withdrawing advertisements to these newspapers and websites, and government advertisements, and this is probably true in many other places, they constitute a huge chunk of the money that these outlets rely on. So therefore, what starts to happen is that if an outlet is told that this amount of money is going to be withdrawn from them because of advertisements, jobs are going to be lost, and ultimately the paper is going to fold or the website is going to be shuttered, then you realize that you have some very difficult choices to make. And these are not just choices that you make as an individual. These are choices that you have to make on behalf of the 20, 30, or 200 people working for you. So again, the behavior of the media really comes down to that simple question of who benefits. Who benefits from us in the UK being told that suddenly there is an influx of small boats? Every morning the BBC reports about small boats. I mean, it makes no sense, you know? So who is benefiting? And that's really what's happening to the media, because it's salaries that are at stake, it's livelihoods, it's people's ability to exist in our societies. So that's really what it comes down to.
Thank you. Dipo, I'd like to hear your views on that as well.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you just said. Narrative is lucrative. And so now there's a sense of, it's not enough to report the news, you need to tell a story. And with telling a story, you need a bad guy, you need a good guy, you need malevolent forces, you need all these things to excite the reader, because what we consider to be the mainstream news, growing up, there were like 4 or 5 channels, about 2 or 3 different news, stations that were considered credible. Whereas now the, typical mainstream news organizations are competing with a 14-year-old in their living room with a TikTok account, and they could choose not to compete with that person. They could say, that person, we can elevate ourselves, but they decided not to elevate themselves because of, financial pressures and other things. So they decided to come and meet that 15-year-old at his level, And so that's the challenge that we now face in this ecosystem. And so in this situation now, how do we now face the challenges ahead of us? Because we are now entering an era of AI and deep fakes. And, I think as you mentioned earlier, pretty much we're at that point now, or getting to that point where every single photo you see, every single video, you start to question it. Is this real? Is it not? And that's not a way to exist, I don't think. To constantly question whether something is even real or not. It's one thing to question, the ethics of it, the moralities of it, where do I stand politically, one side or the other, but to watch a video and be like, is this even real at all? It's something that might have huge implications into the future. And these are things that, we rely on an organized moral media to deal with, but instead they are fighting with TikTok creators, and that is something that, in the long run will be incredibly dangerous for us all.
Thank you. Just in defense of TikTok, apparently they help booksellers immensely. Apparently there's TikTok books or something, and apparently they're really...
I think it's Book Talk.
Book Talk. You can't. I'm showing my age. I have no idea what it is, but anyway, I'm just saying, let's not dump too much onto TikTok. They help authors sell their books. But you, just if you want to answer that question as well before I turn to the audience, so get your questions ready.
Yes. So I was a journalist before the dawn of social media, and I know how the whole media ecosystem has changed when social media came. In the past, you have only few sources of information or sources of news. When you want to do a news bulletin, you have to go to Reuters, or you go to AAP, or you go to AP. So these are the main sources of news. And in the North, we have this oral culture that makes, for example, BBC Hausa Service very authoritative to the extent that whatever people hear, whatever they see, they will wait for BBC's news to confirm whether it's true or not. Unfortunately, when social media came, I remember that when Chinua Achebe died, I was on duty on that day, and I told my editor that, well, I saw it in the news that Chinua Achebe is dead. He said, you mean you saw it on social media? I say, yes. No, you are not serious. We can't use the story from social media. And after an hour, there was confirmation because his publishers were contacted and it was confirmed. So the whole editorial team had to start meeting and finding ways to use the social media to source for news. So what I'm trying to say is that the media is now in a very difficult situation. I am happy that mention has been made about paucity of revenue, which make it very, very difficult, especially in African countries, for the media to exist. Because if you are not towing the line of government, you will be denied advert income, and you will have to close down. So media now is at the beck and call of rich people, powerful people, governments, oil companies, and all that. And that is why we have to continue to look at ways to support and build independent sources of stories, independent sources of news, outlets that can give dissenting opinions platform to express themselves. If you say that there is hunger in Nigeria or there is genocide in Nigeria, we need to have people who have the authority who have the capacity to provide us with accurate information on what is going on. But the media right now, because of internet and many other issues, and there is a monster now that is emerging, which is called monetization, whereby because of monetization, somebody will just and start, spreading lies or canceling people. Someone will sit in his room with a ring light and and make up a story completely. And before you know it, he is making dollars. And so many lazy people, so many redundant people are finding solace in those kind of
So now
engagement. And that is why we are really in danger. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. You've just, you want to say something quickly? Okay.
I think, it's also worth trying to find a middle ground. I think it's a good thing that we now live in a time when, more than just 2 or 3 media organizations control everything that we consume. So, I don't think it's a case of trying to push us back to a time when there were only sort of 2 or 3 trusted anchors and that's it. And as was, Isa really mentioned, which is really important, the monetization issue of it also requires us all to support reliable local journalists in our areas, in our regions, support their work, promote them as well, so that the entire ecosystem isn't reduced to people chasing money through, over-the-top reporting or sensationalism in those ways. So it's trying to find that balance between ensuring that, anyone has the ability to accurately report on what's going on in their communities and not allowing what has historically happened, the Western world, to dictate to all of us what the accepted narrative is. But it's understanding the forces at play and then looking at us. Who can we support to tell our stories? And that, is in the news, it's media, but certainly it's, books and local artists and those of us within our own communities who are out there trying to tell our stories.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I've been a poor manager of time, guys, sorry. So let's take a couple, like maybe 3. I see 2, okay, oh, wow. Okay, let me just take these 3 here, then I'll come to you. So let's do this 3 here. Thank you. I'll come to you.
Okay,
If you don't mind, just say your name and then quickly your comment.
Okay, quickly. I'm Ray. Quick question I wanted to ask is that you mentioned the whole panel has been about disinformation and misinformation, but a lot of it has been focusing on journalists. So I think my question is that, because the average everyday person is not in any way immune to misinformation, and a lot of them can't do a lot of digging to start comparing sources left and right, which one is saying the truth, which one is not. So I think my question is how can that be how can the truth in an era of mass disinformation be more available to the everyday person?
Basically, what tips do you have because regular people are not going to be fact-checking everything they see? Yes, please, yes. And then the lady with the glasses.
Okay, my name is Oyindamola, and I wanted us to think about the fact that can two truths exist? I think some of the issues that we have at the moment is, there's a saying, when America sneezes, the world catches a cold. America has a very polarized, very narrow view of the world, and their politics bleeds into that. So you have very, very strict ideological camps. So I wanted us to consider, can two truths exist? Can you be ideologically maybe conservative with certain things, socially progressive with certain things? But I think at the moment, because the world is very much how America portrays things because they own the media, can we have two truths?
Did you get that? Okay, and then one more.
Dipo already told us that Africa is not a country. And I think that we might be in danger in our discussion of reducing Africa into a country. When we talk about, we tell our stories, we, who is that we? Our communities are divided, countries are divided. There are many Nigerians who support this idea that there's genocide in Nigeria. So I would invite the panelists to apply themselves to that whole question of divisions, lack of cohesion in different communities, in different formations. One question. One more, and I'll keep quiet. The other question is this. As I listen to you, I keep scratching my head. We need a paradigm shift, or many paradigm shifts.
Please share one.
I want you to share it.
No, but you share
what
one.
Can we
You have
do
the
differently?
microphone.
For 1 minute, I thought maybe we should have a phone fast, a social media fast in our country of 200 million people for 1 day.
Thank you.
And
Thank
then
you
let's
so
do
much.
research and see what that yields.
I like that idea. Thank you so much. So you have 3 things to pick from. 3 different questions. Please, maybe you don't all address the same thing, except if you really feel you want to say something on that particular
So
question.
let me take the last question first, about when we say sort of we tell our own stories. There isn't one story. The importance is that we take the responsibility of telling the stories that best represent our own individual identities. And that doesn't mean that one person's story isn't going to come in conflict with somebody else's story. But at least it's from a basis of truth, rather than the myths that were created during the colonial era, where it wasn't our story, but somebody else was telling our story on our behalf. But historically, we've never been afraid to tell the stories of our own communities, to go out there and to shift the way in which people think about the world around us. You know, whether it's through books, whether it's through music, whether it's through film. We've always wanted to do that, but we haven't been given the opportunity to do that. And that is something that is not only fundamental to our day-to-day lives, but it's also fundamental to the way in which we think about who gets to tell our stories into the future, which is why it's something that, you know, through my book, I'm incredibly passionate about, ending this era of us not being the ones telling our stories for us. And so that's the thing. And so once we get the opportunity to do that, and we see it in this room, we see it in so many different places where people are not afraid to speak up, not afraid to challenge each other, not afraid to say, I see what you're saying, here's something else maybe you should also consider. That's what happens when we take that responsibility on ourselves. And then at the end of that, hopefully healthy conversation, something close to a way forward that best, you know, benefits the majority is something that we'll hopefully get to.
Thank you.
I really like the idea of 2 truths. And I think, in fact, you can have multiple truths because we come from different places, we have different ideas, different beliefs, different inclinations. That part certainly makes perfect sense to me, that something can feel completely true to you and the exact opposite can feel completely true to somebody else. But facts are still not something you can contest. What you believe is true, what you feel is true, is different from the fact of what is happening. So I think that's something that I would continue to urge people to keep in mind, especially at a time like this, when we feel things very deeply, and many of us are feeling, on the one hand, that we have been always marginalized, and on the other hand, that we are finally getting an opportunity to occupy our space and to be heard. But through time, all of those things, how we feel, how we see the world, while they change the facts, you know, they are really what they are. So I would continue to urge people to keep that in mind. And with regard to how does one tell what media to look to, as somebody who grew up listening to the BBC, as somebody who was a journalist, read the New York Times, I'm afraid I no longer turn to them for the facts. So the best advice that I can give you is to do perhaps what works for me, which is to get your facts from a variety of sources. Perhaps not be super quick to look to social media, but again, I mean, yeah, let's social media does have its good points, and it does sometimes hop on a story. But the reason it gets those stories super quickly is because it doesn't invest in fact checking. So that's why sometimes we find out that somebody's dead, and it turns out, of course, they're perfectly healthy. But yes, just sort of diversify your sources of news information, and I think that perhaps moving forward, that would serve us all well.
Perfect. Isa, can we just take quickly two more, and then you will start the answer. So there was one hand here, and then there was one hand there. That's it. But let's start here, and then we'll end there. Just your name very quickly and your
my
question.
name is Evidence. I've written the question down. This discourse has mostly been about how the media does not tell the truth or our truth. However, I think it's also important to highlight media outlets that mirror what we conceive as our truth so that their works are not underrated.
That sounded like a comment. Okay, thank you. One more, yes, and then Isa will.
Hi, I'm Chidalu. Based on the conversation which I truly enjoyed, I just want to ask it's just basically relaying the same question that we asked. On the part of the reader, on the part of the audience that are receiving informations like this, how would they, what rules or what things should they do to actually get the right information? Should they fact check, or what really should the reader do to get things right? Thank you.
Thank you. So you start, Isa.
Yes, thank you very much.
It seems this is a real issue for people.
Yes. Thank you very much. So let me start by responding to the issue of two truths, or whether they can exist, and then I will link it up with what this person asked just now. We know the Economist magazine, which is a very old magazine published in London, and they have one culture that make them unique in the sense that they never write bylines on their stories. So when you
what's a byline?
Byline, well, when you do a story and you say this story is written by so person, so they don't write bylines, and that has been their culture since I think 1863. I think and they continue to do that, and one of the reasons why they were doing that was because they want the reader to prioritize using his own critical thinking to assess, to examine what he has read and make a decision on his own on whether it is true or not. So, for example, our biases can easily come. I noticed something recently happening in Nigeria's very chaotic and dramatic social space, whereby when people pick a story, the first thing they do is that they look at the name. Which tribe is he from? That is what they do. So people are increasingly unable to have the strength of character, the strength of conviction to assess information they are reading. These are people that went to school, actually. Some of them had expensive education. And when they look at a story and it doesn't appeal to their own sentiments, to their own biases, they then look for the fall guy. Who is the fall guy? The person who wrote the story. Oh, this is a Hausa man. Oh, this is a Yoruba man. This is an Igbo man. So the facts in that story no longer matter at all. What matters is what is this person? And that is a failure of character, and that is why we have to continue to encourage people to be fair, to be objective, and to have the strength of character to be able to take the truth, whether it comes from the people you like or it comes from people that you don't like. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I mean, that's perfect timing. I think, did you want to say something about that? Very briefly. Your eyes are on the clock too, right? Okay.
So very briefly, just on because we've had two questions now about how to essentially verify information. And I think both of them come from the prism of life is busy, we have things to do, how do I quickly? And I think there is that temptation that you must form an opinion immediately. And that's where a lot of this temptation comes from. You don't need to have an opinion on a topic straight away. It's okay to say, I don't know enough yet. I only just read about it this morning. And there's that temptation. Things that you are passionate about that affect you and your community, it is worth finding time to verify. And as Sonia mentioned, facts are facts. And so it is always possible to check what is true and what's not true when it comes to simple facts. So I'd say try and rid yourself of that temptation to feel like you must be an expert immediately. We're all expected to just know straight away, what do you think, what's your opinion, put it out there. Take the time on the most important issues to research, find out what is factually right and what's not. And then when you have information about what is factually right or not, then you can weigh that against your own personal moral judgment in terms of, where you want to take that factual information. But try your best to resist that urge to say, I must know immediately, and be very confident saying, look, to be honest, I just don't know enough right now. And then I just don't know enough.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I mean, thank you. You've been a great audience, but please, a round of applause for our three panelists. Thank you so much. We could have gone on for much longer, but thank you.
Again,